Hello, Frizzle freaks! Halloween is just around the corner and I am ready to get into that spooky season. So today, we're going to be reading some spooky books. I've decided to start with the coziest, least spooky of the 3 books I've selected today, which is The Witchwood Knot. This is a book tagged as fantasy, romance, gothic, and horror, which sounds like just the right stepping stone into the more horrific books I'm going to be reading later. In this video, I'm also so excited I'm going to be making pumpkin cookies. I love making pumpkin cookies and I haven't done it in such a long time. I'm also going to be sharing the recipe and teaching you how to do it along the way. I will also be reading The Devil and the Dark Water, and I am not a serial killer. So let's get started. Come lay down with me. I've been sitting up too long today. And let's talk about the first book, Witchwood Knot, which I'm about 17% through. First, let me tell you what the plot of this one is, and then I'll tell you on how it's doing on our spooky season meter. So we are following Winnie Hall, and she is a recently hired governess to this Victorian mansion that everyone thinks is haunted. Is it? Not quite by ghosts, but it does seem to have a malevolent fairy infestation. And so far, there's a lot of secrets about our protagonist, Winnie. She definitely has a very robust working knowledge of the Fae, of magic. She does tarot cards, she has a ghost cat familiar, and she has like a job to do at this manor and things that she's trying to figure out. I don't know what those are yet, but she has them. Winnie is there working in the mansion with various other servants, all of which are very creeped out about the fairy and desperate enough for work to stay in the haunted mansion. There's also the lady of the house, who's a very scared old woman who lives in the attic, and has hired Winnie specifically to take care of her grandson, who has recently arrived at the house. So Winnie is governess slash babysitter slash maybe fairy exterminator. And then of course we have our villain of the piece, the fairy. I've forgotten his name. Let me check it. Mr. Quincy is what he goes by, and he's trapped at the manor and bitter about it. And he's actively trying to frighten people away from the manor with spookiness. And I'm really invested in a few things. I'm invested in figuring out what is Winnie up to? Like, why did she investigate in the manor? Why did she want to come to this haunted place? I'm invested in why our Fae, Mr. Quincy, is trapped there, and why is he so intent on scaring people away from the mansion? And I'm also invested in, this is tagged as romance, right? So I'm like, who is the love interest for Winnie? And if I had to guess right now, I would say it's our mischievous, maybe evil Fae troublemaker guy, and I'm excited to see them take that journey. I mean, there are a few other minor characters, the other servants, and it also could be one of them, but not leaning towards that yet. So how's it doing on spookiness? The vibes are there. It's very haunted mansion, but not in like a scary way, just in like a cozy Halloween spooky vibe. More wholesome than actually scary on the spooky meter, and I think this is a great place to start out this video. I'm very much enjoying all of it. I'm 56% into the Witchwood Knot, and I'm loving it. This book, the vibes are immaculate, the characters are great, the adventure, yes, the spookiness is here. So remember, we've got our protagonist, Winnie, and then she's got her main antagonist, fairy, that she's facing off with, Mr. Quincy. So they're in a haunted mansion, and it's haunted by both fairies and ghosts at this point, and they're all stuck in this mansion because of this curse. Winnie's job is to try to unravel this curse without hurting anyone in the process, and she's really struggling with it. One of the things that I really appreciate about this book is that at the beginning, Winnie was really confident, like, yeah, I can break curses, I'm good at magic. And then the more that she learns about the curse, the more sticky she realizes it is. And then we've got the main malevolent fairy in the house, Mr. Quincy, who also wants the curse to be unraveled. He's just going about it in somewhat less moral ways than Winnie wants to. And their banter, their relationship is like top tier, where they like both appreciate each other's company and they're both trying to work towards the same goal of vanquishing this curse. But also, they're almost always at odds while doing it. They're on opposite sides of this feud between the humans and the fairies that are trapped here. And he feels both like valiant, where he'll like stick up for Winnie when other fairies are giving her a hard time sometimes, but also like incredibly dangerous where he will also do mean things to Winnie, where he will also like twist her words and make evil bargains with her because it's just like his nature. Every time they're on screen together, it's so entertaining because you can tell that they care for each other, and the more time that they spend together on this curse, the more that they're caring for each other because they have this deep respect for each other. But also the more time that they spend with each other, they realize that like their aims, they might want the same destination, but they're going about it in such different ways that they like can't work together. Or Mr. Quincy seems totally okay with like murdering a few humans along the way, and Winnie's main motivation here is to protect humans. And the vibes, very spooky. Definitely the more we learn about the curse that's on this mansion, the more Halloween-y it feels. It's never like really scary, but it's definitely eerie all the way through. I also love how this book is leaning into the Victorian era that it's placed in, where they had a lot of like interesting culture and traditions and obsessions around death. And then this book is also playing with that, where there's all these obsessions about death from the characters, and it's playing into like necromancy magic and ghosts and everything. So my expected rating now, about midway through the book, is 4 stars. I'm loving it. I'm not yet obsessed with it, but we will see how this ending strikes me. Hi, hello! I finished the Witchwood Knot and I am so excited to tell you about it. Like really, really excited. Also, while I'm telling you about this, we are going to be prepping for making pumpkin cookies. This is one of my favorite things, and of course it's Halloween week, I gotta make them. But step 1 is replenishing my pumpkin spice mix because I make my own blend and it's almost out and I'm gonna need some more when making the cookies. So we're going to be making the spice blend while I'm telling you about the Witchwood Knot and how I feel about the ending. And in a future clip of the video, I'm going to be making the cookies, and in another clip, I'm going to be reviewing the cookies. So stay tuned for that. I'm pretty excited to see how they turn out. So first ingredient, cinnamon, of course, the base of any good pumpkin spice mix, in my opinion. I think I'm gonna need a quick little funnel here. Good thing I already have these sticky notes out, but I think 2 sticky notes will be. There we go, funnel, which fits my little thing here, and also I can use my tablespoon. I think one of the things that I most admire about the Witchwood Knot is how subtly it does the romance. Like it is, I'd say, a fantasy romance, but more on the fantasy instead of the romance. But you know how most romance books, you introduce the love interest, and you know immediately from the get-go that they're the love interest just because of the vibes, right? Oh no, I've gotten distracted. How many tablespoons was that? Ooh, I can watch back the video to know how many tablespoons I just put in. Okay, so we're gonna leave that a mystery. I'm keeping a record this time of what I put in the spice blend, because last time I just went purely on vibes, but I want to be able to recreate it this time. Our next spice is nutmeg. The Witchwood Knot, I mean, you heard me at the beginning. I wasn't even sure who the love interest is. I was taking different guesses and stabs. It came so slowly. And of course, it was between our main character, Winnie, and the somewhat malevolent fairy that she's facing off against, Mr. Quincy. And I adored this romance. The more it developed, the more they got to know each other, the better it was. Like, it was like exquisite, no notes. I loved it. Every second of it was perfect. Can I convey that enough? I want you to be able to see my face during this rant. Let's move this angle. The romance, I can't get over how great it was. Like, it started off very slow. They're enemies, they're rivals, like literally on opposite sides of this curse. And then slowly they realize the more that they work together, that 1, their aims do align, and 2, they are such a good team, and they admire each other so deeply that it like becomes a deep, respectful friendship while they're also still enemies and threatening each other. And then it becomes a love story, and I adored it. It was so cute and so fun and so spooky. They were like saying like, oh, I love how despicable you are. I love that you just torture that person. A+, would do it myself too, but I really admired how you handled that. Like, one of my favorite lines in the book is one of the things that they bond over is a love of piano. And one of them says to the other one, like, I wish I could listen to you play piano until your fingers bleed. And I'm like, wow, it's like an Addams Family romance over here. It's like dark, but not in a scary way, just in like a wow, they're both really into it kind of way. Anyway, So good. I ship it. I love it. It was so entertaining and fun. The actual plot of the book was also very entertaining and fun. As things progressed, it got more ghastly on our spooky meter here. As Winnie gets entangled in this knot of evil fairy magic, she has to confront some scary topics and things, and there's some actual horror scenes. It's still pretty light horror. Like, if you're a scaredy cat, I'd still recommend this book. It wasn't like scary, but it was more than eerie level, you know? I think if I were to say one complaint about this book, the first, let's do the next spice, because I lost my train of thought here. Next, we are putting in some allspice. The one complaint I have about this book is it feels very connected universe-y, because it takes place in the same world as the other series by this author, the Regency fairy tales, and I have not read any of the Regency fairy tales. And this book references the events of those fairy tales quite a bit, like not so much that it's spoiling them, but so much so that I almost feel spoiled for them, you know? And then this book is also very much setting up the plot for the sequels, which I am looking forward to reading. But I do like my stories a little bit more self-contained, and it felt like this was leaning on the prequels of the Regency Fairy Tales trilogy a little too much, and also leaning on, okay, these plot points are going to be resolved in future books about other people in the Victorian era kind of vibes. But other than that, it was so fun and spooky, and I was so invested in them untangling this knot of fairy magic. I was so invested in them breaking the curse, and it was all because it was hinging on, one, the romance as they learn to work together, and two, Winnie's character arc herself, standing up to her greatest fears and also finding ways to care about the annoying child she was taking care of at the beginning of the book when she was finding it difficult to care for. Next on the spice blend, we are adding salt. I think salt should be a part of any pumpkin spice blend, because honestly, I'm always like, these pastries, they're not salty enough. Okay, I'm gonna shake this up, and then I'm going to tell you my rating of the Witchwood Knot. I'm giving the Witchwood Knot 5 stars. 5 fantastic stars. Middle of the book, I was feeling 4 stars about it, and then the book only got better. It got better in getting more spooky. It got better in having even higher stakes than before. It got better in the romance was wonderfully developed and made me ship it even more. 5 stars. I need to read more from this author. Definitely look out in the future, because I'm going to be reading those Regency Fairy Tales books and anything else that this author puts out. This is the second book I've read by her, and the first one I gave 4 stars. This one 5 stars. Like, we're on a roll here with Olivia Atwater. So, let's go talk about the next book and make some pumpkin cookies. The next book of this adventure is The Devil and the Dark Water, and this one is tagged as mystery, thriller, and fantasy, which I think all combine into a type of mild Halloween-y horror, which I'm hoping for. That's about the level of horror I'm currently craving, and we're going to get into the more hardcore horror with the next book in this video. I am 18% into The Devil and the Dark Water, and so far, I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed by how slow it is. Like, I'm 18% into this thick book, and we haven't really felt like we've hit the plot yet. But so far, here's what we got. Our main character, I'd say, though we're bouncing around in a few different perspectives, is a man named 𝐅𝐎𝐻𝐿, and he is the bodyguard for famous detective Sammy Pipps, pretty much like a Sherlock Holmes character. And they are about to set off on a journey across the seas to bring Mr. Sammy Pipps to a trial, because he's been accused of something which we also haven't gotten yet. Like, I, and also our main character 𝐅𝐿, have no idea what this is about. Which I think the book is trying to make like an enticing mystery, but I really don't care about it at this point. So, as they are setting off on this voyage, there is like a mysterious beggar leper character who gets up and foretells their voyage's doom and then like bursts into flames. And then they find out that this like beggar guy was probably being like manipulated by someone else, and someone else was setting him on fire and putting him up to this, which, yeah. So now, while famous detective Sammy Pipps is locked up in the ship's hold, it is up to his bodyguard 𝐅𝐿, who is Mr. I am strong man, does not think, but, you know, is secretly actually really smart, to try to solve this case of who is foretelling doom on their voyage and why, and can they put a stop to it. Also, one of our perspective characters is like the captain's wife, I think, who also heard this foretelling and heard Sammy Pipps' opinions on it, and she's also trying to combat this in some way. She hasn't really done much yet. So I think my biggest beef with this so far is that the book isn't really giving me much with all of these plots. Like, they have this foretelling of doom, and they suspect it means that someone's gonna sabotage anything, but there aren't really any, like, suspects yet. There isn't actually, like, crimes on the ship yet. The one thing that is hooking me in here is our protagonist, 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐿, seems to have some sort of dark past to do with, like, witchcraft and false accusations and stuff. And it seems like that is getting tied in with whatever is the bad foretelling about the ship. So I am intrigued about where that's going. But so far, I'm just kind of holding on to this book because I've enjoyed something by this author before, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. That's why I decided to pick up this book. And that one was really clever. So I'm hoping that this book gets cleverer, you know? So I am 44% through The Devil and the Dark Water, and I have a significant update for you, but first I'm going to tell you a little story. Once upon a time, I was chatting with my mom, and she asked me, like, how are you so good at giving up on books? When do you decide? How do you decide when to stop reading a book? And the answer is simple. When I don't want to keep reading, when I have zero desire to read the next page, I don't read the next page. And so this goes to say that I will be DNFing The Devil in the Dark Water for a bunch of reasons, but not completely, which I'll also get to in a minute. Here are some of the things that The Devil in the Dark Water has going for it. It's got fascinating characters. Our protagonist, 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐿, as he investigates this, is very invested in it himself, because the mischief aboard the boat is connected to a devil named Old Tom that he has a history with. Is this a real devil or is it a superstition? Unclear. Our other sleuth, whose name is Sarah, who is not the wife of the captain, like I said before, but the wife of a dignitary on the boat. Anyway, wife of an important person on the boat. And though she is not given any importance by the social hierarchy on this boat because she's a woman, but, you know, of course, she's a raging feminist and is trying to solve the mystery anyway because she cares if this boat sinks, even if no one else seems to but 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐿. One of the other things that I was really looking forward to and hoping that would pan out more is the relationship between 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐿 and our Sherlock Holmes character, Sammy Pipps, because Sammy is locked up, so 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐿 doesn't get to talk with him very often, but they do get to talk once a day. And so far we've had one of those scenes and nothing really happened of it. And I would be fascinated with a further exploration of this dynamic of 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐿 was once the sidekick and now he's being forced to be full detective. But not really much going on there either. All of these plot lines, it doesn't feel like any of them are actually going anywhere. Like they're sleuthing in circles and not getting anywhere. There's this looming threat of things might happen because someone put a threat to the boat, but nothing has really happened yet. It all feels very theoretical and pointless and meandering. Part of my decision to give up on this book also is that I went a reading on the Goodreads reviews for it, as sometimes I do when I'm debating, okay, is this about to get better? Because if I see like a 3-star review that said, I really hated the first half, the second half was better, then maybe I'll stick it out. It seems like the Goodreads reviews agree that the pacing's pretty consistent throughout the entire book, which in my opinion is way too slow, so we're done with that. But there were quite a lot of reviews saying how wild and surprising and interesting the ending was, and it seems to be quite polarizing. Lots of people are saying that they love the twist ending and some people are saying that they hate it. So I think I'm actually going to skip to the last few chapters and read those because I am interested with what the twist ending is. And I actually have a theory. So I'm just invested enough to go read that twist ending, but not invested enough to read everything in between 44% and the end of the book. I think one of the things that this book also feels pretty lackluster about is I picked up this book because I loved The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. One of the things that book had really going for it was a strong point of view character. We had one point of view character and he had a lot emotionally going on, a lot of inner turmoil that he was also solving as he solved a murder mystery. We have two main POV characters, 𝐂𝐸𝐻𝐿 and Sarah. They're both invested in solving the mystery, which is not yet a murder mystery, is just a vague threat. But mostly just because they don't want the boat that they're on to sink. They don't actually have like a personal stake in it. Like 𝐅𝐎𝐻𝐿 does have this connection to his past wrapped up in this devil that's threatening the boat, but it's not like he's expecting to get answers about his dark past through this investigation. It's just a weird connection right now. So I think right now, at this DNF point, I'm gonna give Devil in the Dark Water 2 stars. Not quite bad enough for 1 star, but certainly not great. And I don't really care how awesome the twist ending is at this point. That's not gonna change my star rating. But I will check in with you. I've now finished The Devil and the Dark Water. Read like the last half of the last chapter so I could know what the solution to the mystery was and what the twist was that was so controversial. And I have some thoughts on that, and I'm going to tell you those thoughts as we start baking pumpkin cookies. This recipe for pumpkin cookies is very easy. Can of pumpkin, yellow food cake, pumpkin spice, which we made the mix earlier, and, of course, chocolate chips. Why would you ever make cookies without chocolate chips in them? I love, though it's a part of traditional pumpkin cookies, which is malt powder. I love the taste of malt, and I've been putting it in lots of things. Mostly bread that I bake, but also pastries, and it tastes so good. And I've got to mix this with the other powders first, because it clumps really bad with water. And then I think we're going to put in 2 tablespoons of this pumpkin pie spice. That smells so good. Okay, putting the cake mix in, and we will mix together all the powders before adding more of our liquids. Oh, we're also adding an egg. Okay, so for the Devil in the Dark Water ending, first I want to say that I totally called the mystery. I knew the whodunit. Did I get why done it? No, my guess for why done it was completely off, but I don't feel too bad about that because the reveal at the end of why the person did it seemed like totally out of left field to me from the person who only read the first half of the book. Maybe it was well established in the second half, but there was no way I could have guessed that, so whatever. I understand why some people could reach that ending and be like, that feels out of character and cheap. And I see why people would have been disappointed by it, and I think even me guessing it, I would have been kind of disappointed by it, you know? So let's keep making these cookies, and then I'm going to talk about how it ranks on our spooky meter and what I rated the book. So then we put in an egg. This is the most experimental part. Well, I guess I haven't put malt powder in these before when I made them before, but this is also experimental. Then we get to open this can of pumpkin puree. I've made my own pumpkin puree in the past, but honestly it never turns out as well as the canned stuff. I always get it way too liquidy. And then I'm adding all this extra moisture to a recipe that doesn't want any, you know? So, Devil in the Dark Water, where does it go in our spookiness scale? And honestly, I wouldn't even put it on the spookiness scale. It is not eerie, it is not ghastly, it is not anything in between. Like, I guess if I had to put it somewhere, it would be more on the eerie side, because at no point was I ever actually frightened. It was marked as a thriller, right? That was one of the tags that I was thinking would make it more spooky. It was not thrilling. So boring for the first half. And from reading other people's reviews, I don't think it really gets all that much thrilling past that. So yeah, we're just gonna say it doesn't even belong on the spookiness scale. Like, it wasn't a spooky book. And indeed, I'm still giving this book 2 stars. See, I'm very generous with my stars. I could give this book 1 star. And I know other people would disagree because my average rating is like a 3.36. That obviously I'm not being very generous, but it feels like I'm being generous in this moment because there's very little I actually liked about this book. The more I sit with it, the more I'm like, wow, that book was so boring. Like, how did it be so boring? And I might also add more pumpkin spice, depending on how the dough tastes in a minute. Let's bring it closer so you get to watch it mix. This is the fun part, right? With the addition of the egg, I think that this is too wet. So I think now we have to add some flour. Oh wait! Instead of adding flour, we're gonna add more cake mix. I know this is gonna sound weird. Here, look, I have a container of a little bit of leftover cake mix because I only used a little bit of it for this cake mix bread thing that I made earlier. And then I get to use up this half used up cake mix, which I've been trying to figure out what to use it for. Like, I made little like mug brownie things with it, but honestly, it wasn't that good. Yeah, that'll bake well. And it tastes so good. So, I'm a big fan of not baking more cookies than you actually need at a time. I'll just scoop out a bunch of cookie dough and freeze it.
I'm not actually gonna make a single one of these cookies right now, but I will be making some tonight, but I'm just gonna freeze the dough in the meantime. The cookie dough typically freezes well. Have I ever tried to freeze this particular dough? No, but I'm just being hopeful. You know, actually it's probably gonna be extra sticky. We should put something down first. The good thing about just scooping them on to freeze them is that it doesn't matter if they're super close together because we're not gonna be baking them, they're not gonna be expanding. And also these cookies don't expand that much anyway. So we've got room, cookies in the fridge. However, the big challenge is going to be fitting the other one in the freezer. We're going to have to do some creative moving around a little bit, but I think it'll be possible. Ta-da! Fits in freezer. The next book of the video is I Am Not a Serial Killer. The reason that I picked this one is that I read it a handful of years ago and I loved this book. Originally I gave it 4 stars, but with time I've changed that rating to 5 because it's just stayed with me so well. And this one is the only horror book that I've really given 5 stars. Like, I know we had a 5-star earlier, but that was more fantasy romance with horror vibes. But this one, it's a true horror. And like, I knew it was gonna be really good, right? Because I gave it 5 stars in the past, but now starting this on a reread, I'm 20% into this book. And it's like even better than I remember. And I'm like, how did I not give this 5 stars on first blush? I think I just was a little less used to horror. One of the things that I admire so well about this book is its first few chapters and scenes are laid out so well, where every single scene gives you a new piece of the puzzle of this character. It's very character focused. Our main character is named John. He's a 15-year-old. And in the first chapter, you get to learn that his family owns a funeral home and he really likes helping out with the embalming. He likes being around dead bodies. He has a kind of obsession about it. And that's the first scene. You learn that about him. And you get to see him in his element doing that. And then you get the next scene and he's at school and you get to learn about how he's a social outcast, and a big reason for his social outcastness, his favorite topic is serial killers. And he'll just talk anyone's ear off about serial killers, but nothing else. Very quiet otherwise. So the only friend he has, they just kind of hang out together because no one else will tolerate the two of them but each other. His friend is super obnoxious and won't shut up about everything. And you get to see how John interacts socially, that he's not really caring about the friend, but he treasures the idea of a friend because he aspires to be more normal. And he knows that normal people have friends, right? And then we get the next scene and we get to see him obsessing over this recent murder in his small town because he likes dead bodies. He likes serial killers. An interesting murder. It's right up his alley. And then we get the next scene and it's him with his therapist and he's talking through all of his obsessions and how he's aware that he has a lot of serial killer tendencies. And so he makes lists of rules for himself to stop himself from doing serial killer behavior, which is where the title of the book comes in. I Am Not a Serial Killer, because our main character, John, he feels in his heart that he's destined to become a serial killer. He has all the serial killer urges and characteristics and quirks, but he doesn't want to be a serial killer. So this is like his manifesto. Like, I am not a serial killer, and he really wants to fight against this. But then as we get further and further into the plot, we see that this murder in the town is the beginnings of an interesting serial killer, which eventually turns horror supernatural. It's so good because, and we get a scene mixed in where we see that tensions between John and his mom are at an all-time high because his mom doesn't know how to deal with her weird kid. And he doesn't know how to deal with his mom because he doesn't have good social skills. But they're both craving a better relationship, but they're kind of spinning their wheels and just making everything worse every time they talk to each other. In just a few chapters, it's set up like everything we need to know about who John is, who he wants to be, the things he's struggling with, and the beginnings of our action-y plot of him versus this serial killer. But the book gave it to us in just the right pacing that everything feels so manageable. We didn't get all those details in one scene. We just got them as they became relevant to the scenes, as we got to see more and more facets of our protagonist. I love how character-focused these books are. Book 1 and the sequels, but book 1 is particularly strong, and I am so excited to keep reading it. It's been long enough that I don't remember all the intricacies of the plot points, so I can still be surprised. But yeah, this book, it's so good. It's both compelling and unsettling. in like every scene because it's dealing with a lot of death in kind of creepy ways. But that's like the point, is kind of the internal conflict of our protagonist, is that he really is obsessed with death and serial killers, but he doesn't want to be that creepy. So he's always fighting against his nature, but also giving into it. It's such an interesting dichotomy. Anyway, I'm very excited to keep reading this book. So I've finished I Am Not a Serial Killer. And boy, do I have some thoughts. So one of the things that I forgot about is how early you learn who done it, right? There's a serial killer loose in town and our protagonist is investigating it because he's obsessed with serial killers. And he figures out who the serial killer is at like 30% into this book. Like, you are not kept in suspense for a long time. This novel is not trying to be a mystery, you know? What this book is interested in is being a deeply psychological character study horror. So the murderer is like a literal monster who can transform and have demon claws and stuff and is referred to in the novel as the demon. And so John, our teenage hero, feels like he can't go to the police with his findings because they'll just think he's crazy. So he decides to take matters into his own hands because he knows himself. He's probably good at killing things and stalking things. He can do it. So then he starts relaxing his rules. He starts embracing his serial killer side, but only for this monster, right? He doesn't want to kill people, right? Just this monster. And this is the dichotomy of the book. As John is embracing his serial killer nature, it quickly extends outside of just hunting down this monster to a lot of other facets of his life. And the big tension of this novel is he going to be able to stop? Even after he catches this monster, is he going to become a serial killer and get his next fix? And one of the other dimensions of this novel that is so good is that the more that John is stalking the monster and investigating him and trying to figure out how to destroy him, the more John realizes that the monster isn't a sociopath. John is. John, if he killed someone, he would barely feel anything for it. The monster feels guilt and regret. So this monster is killing a bunch of people, but it's not killing out of an instinctual psychological need to kill. It's killing because it needs to like drink their body parts for monster reasons, you know? So then the more that John gets to know the monster, the more he realizes that in a lot of ways, this demon is more human than he is. Because this demon is good at forming friendships, is good at having empathy for people and guilt for bad actions and all of it. And John isn't. And so we've got this dichotomy of, as John is becoming more and more monster-like, he's also discovering that this monster is actually pretty human and cares a lot about people. It's such a good nemesis-ship built up between them, of these contrasts between their personalities. And the tension of seeing John descend into this like madness that he's been fighting for the first act against, and then slowly embracing it and falling too far, like that stakes, they hit. It's creepy and it's a masterpiece. Because while I am cheering John on because I want him to catch this monster and stop all the killings in his town, I'm also yelling at him to stop. Because I know it's bad for him, this road that he's going down. So I'm giving I'm Not a Serial Killer 5 stars again. It's so good. And on our spooky season meter, we're going pretty far into ghastly. This book gets pretty gory and intense. And you know, I think now it's time to make and taste some cookies.
Very good. You didn't quite have time to cook them all the way. But
We are in a hurry
close
today.
enough.
But they are very yummy cookies. That's a good cookie. I was considering putting frosting on top. Cream cheese frosting.
Doesn't need it.
But it doesn't need it. The chocolate provides such a richness. Sweet pop. I give these cookies 5 stars. Would make again. Will make again.
You have a lot of dough.
I put all the extra dough. Now it's in all of these Ziplocs in the freezer. So I'm ready to make pumpkin cookies whenever I want.